Amy, we want to thank you, first of all, for inviting us into your classroom to watch your read aloud. Again, it's always a joy to watch you, but we want to talk about how the lesson went. So to start off with, we want to ask you how you felt the read aloud went.
Overall, I felt that it went very well. Of course, there are things that could have gone better, but in general, I thought it was successful. I had clear objectives, and I think that for the most part, those objectives were met.
Okay. And can you please tell us what they were? What did you want all students to know, understand, or be able to do?
The main focus of the read aloud was for the students to be able to make inferences so that they could determine different points of views of the characters. So inference.
And do you feel that that was accomplished through this lesson?
I do. I felt that the students were able to turn and talk about the story. They were pulling the inferences out based on the questions that I asked.
Great. I was found interesting is some of your questioning had to change a little bit during, and so can you tell me what prompted that question?
Can you give me an example of which changes?
Yes, when you were asking the students to look for inferences on character, and then they were starting to predict.
Okay.
And so then you went back, and so you're questioning. So
I had to redirect several of the questions because, as you said, some of the kids, when I was asking, how is Mr. Mask feeling right now? What makes you think that? They were jumping ahead and making predictions about what was going to happen next. And so I had to refocus their questions. And that's something that we're still working on in the read alouds in my classroom.
Right.
They're so eager to share something that sometimes it's not in response to my question.
All right. And and too, I just feel inferences at this grade level, that's a concept it takes a while to get there. And so I thought your modeling of it was wonderful. You gave examples as well.
And that was one of the things that, as I was reflecting on the lesson, that I would probably do differently.
That was my next question.
The introduction,
yeah.
Rather than, I started something along the lines of, what do we call it when? And I think to do it again, my introduction would be different. I think I would start off with an example of an inference rather than just a direct question. What do we call it when?
Yes, and I'm glad you came to that point because that's what I was thinking as well. That's good. So what part of the lesson and during the story did you feel that they were starting to grasp that idea of making inferences? Do you recall?
I can't honestly recall a particular point. There was a point when I was getting worried because a student went, what I felt, way off. And it'll be interesting to see the video because I kept going back to this person and focusing around his response, and probably I directed too much attention to it. It was obvious probably to the kid.
Yeah.
It was obvious to me with my questioning that there was something with his response because I kept going back to it.
Right.
So, after that, I finally realized, okay, give it up. You're kind of, going too far with it. We'll figure it out.
Right.
And at the very end, I know your question was what during the lesson, but
that's okay.
On this topic, at the very end, then I went back to that student and redirected the question, and he had changed his mind.
Yes.
So
yes. I know, that was good.
I think my class is still at the point in read alouds where they want to go along with anybody else.
Yeah.
Right.
And so that's why I was calling on some other kids.
Right.
To see if they felt the same way, and that's still just a point where we're at. The kids rarely disagree with one another. I think they get these ideas that, he must be right, or she must be right.
And they say, I agree with, and I agree with.
I agree with, exactly.
Correct.
But they're not sharing anything different.
But your modeling and your facial expression is not giving away if it's a right or wrong. So that's an excellent plus there because I did notice they wanted to look at you and see, okay, is this guy on the right track? And so you're doing a great job on modeling that piece because they're going to soon, get along to that communication part and start thinking on their own.
Right.
So that's good lead into that.
And I thought it was interesting at one point, one of the kids asked me what I thought. I don't know if you caught that.
Yeah.
I said, do you think that and it was directed to me. I thought that was kind of cool. That was the first time that any of my students have asked me in the middle of a read aloud what I thought.
And I'm glad you said that, because that was my next point. Is I've noticed just with your children is what's happening is they're feeling very comfortable about questioning you and questioning what's happening in the story, because they started asking, what was that? Oh, what was that alarm for? Because at the White House, I thought that was really insightful, because they're not afraid to have that conversation now, and they're starting to question the text instead of just
And
whatever the
they
book
don't always
says.
wait for me to direct a question either.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's healthy. It's important to have a conversation. When you truly have a
Within
conversation.
reason.
Yeah, of course. But that's a good thing, just to let them ask their questions or talk about it.
Absolutely.
The kids were engaged as a result of your turn and talk, but one thing I did notice was when they were talking in their groups is one particular person would dominate the conversation, or one would start and then he'd back off because this other person was more dominant. What could you do to
One
stop
of the
that
things,
from
and I
happening?
noticed that also on a couple of kids, I think with time and by me going out, rather than just staying in my chair when they're turning and talking, getting out and monitoring that and encouraging them to do that, and try to pinpoint the kids who are dominating it. I know there were 2 or 3 instances where when I went out in the crowd, I could tell immediately someone was dominating. And I would say, why don't we let this person go first? But I did not get to everyone. And that was one of the things that I had on my list of, what could I do better? There were some kids that didn't share today. And I cannot say for sure that they were engaging in the accountable
That was going to be our
talk.
next question, but one suggestion that Julie and I talked about was numbering your kids, because some of them were in triads. If you numbered them 1, 2, 3,
1, 2s.
and then before you ask your question, okay, I want ones to answer first this time, then 2s, and then 3s. Okay, next time 2s, you start off, then 3s, so they know that they're all going to get a turn to speak.